All right. Oh, I forgot to do my countdown. Hey, everyone. Normally, I do my countdown in order for me to get myself ready, but I guess I'm just going to jump right into it. So, thank you guys so much for joining me on my channel, The Magical Solution. We are live here tonight on TikTok, on YouTube, and on my private Facebook group, The Magical Solution. This is how we grow. So, you guys are here because we have been reading from this book, The Spirits book by Allan Kardec. It's been an awesome ride so far. We are getting there. Look, there's only this much left, and I'm so excited. Um, and we're now, I believe, on chapter 31. However, I stopped. I stopped about halfway through chapter 30 because I was noticing that I just wasn't feeling the vibe of continuing to read anymore. And so I stopped. And I said, you know what? Let me pick up where I left off the next time. So the name of the chapter is called The Law of Progress, but the section that we're on is relapsed cultures. Okay, so I want to say that that's where we left off the last time, and we'll pick up there. Okay, so let's get to it. Okay. Oh, and for those of you who are joining us here for the first time, welcome. And so let me just do a quick little synopsis before we get started. So this book is the first book in a series that's written by Allan Kardec. Allan Kardec was a man who lived way back when in France, who was a scientist, a skeptic, just a very brilliant mind. He was a teacher. And, during his time, he had come across the phenomenon that was happening at France at that time, which was the phenomenon of spiritists and people who were doing table tippings and people who were, claiming that spirits were in the room and all that stuff. And he was finding that to be, you know, crazy. And so he did a lot of research on it and wanted to learn more about it. And what ended up happening was he stumbled upon real mediums and real people with real gifts and did case studies on them. And those case studies involved him interviewing these mediums and asking them all sorts of questions about the afterlife, the spirit, the just, I mean, everything. And he tries his best to ask these questions from the perspective of a skeptic and from the perspective of a scientist. And he tries his best to stump these mediums by kind of asking the same questions over again, but in a slightly different way to see if they'll answer it the same way and all that stuff. And so that's where we get these series from. And so basically, these series are kind of like a dialogue between him and the mediums who are channeling these spirits from the other side. All right, so that's the best synapse that I can give you in such a short period of time, but let's get to it. So, relapsed cultures. Question 786. History has shown us many cultures that relapsed into barbarity after shocking events deeply upset them. Where is the progress in such a case? When your house threatens to collapse, you demolish it in order to build a stronger and more comfortable one. Until it is rebuilt, however, there is trouble and confusion in your dwelling. A further example: you are poor and live in a hovel, but you become wealthy and leave it to live in a palace. And then some poor fellow, as you formerly were, comes and takes your place in the hovel and feels very content because he previously had no shelter at all. Very well. Learn from this that the spirits incarnated in those declining cultures are no longer the spirits who had compromised them during their time of splendor, because they have progressed. Those former spirits have moved into even more perfect dwellings, while less advanced ones have taken their place, which they too will leave behind in their turn. 787. Aren't there peoples that by their very nature rebel against progress? Yes, but they are corporally disappearing day by day. Well, what will be the future fate of the souls who animate those people? Like all other souls, they will finally arrive at perfection by passing through other existences, and God deserts no one. So the most civilized individuals may have been primitive beings and cannibals at some point in history. You yourself were such more than once before becoming what you are now. 788. Well, like individuals, cultures are collective individualities that pass through childhood, adulthood, and decrepitude. Since this truth is attested to by history, does it not lead us to assume that the most advanced cultures of this century will decline and end just as those of antiquity? Those cultures that only live a material existence and whose greatness is founded only upon power and territorial expansion are born, grow, and die out because might of a culture exhausts itself, just like that of an individual. Cultures with selfish laws that clash with the progress of enlightenment and charity die out because light annihilates darkness and charity eradicates selfishness. However, for cultures, as for individuals, there is the life of the soul, and cultures with laws that are in harmony with the eternal laws of the Creator will live and will be guiding lights for other cultures. 789. Will progress someday unite all of Earth's people into a single nation? Not into a single nation. That would be impossible because nationalities are formed based on different customs and needs arising from the diversity in climates, and their local laws are designed to accommodate such customs and needs. Charity, on the other hand, knows nothing of geographical latitudes and does not differentiate people by their color. When the law of God compromises the basis of human law everywhere, cultures and individuals will practice the law of charity towards each other, living joyfully and peacefully because no one will attempt to deceive their neighbor or live at his or her expense. Did y'all hear that? That was literally what we were talking about on TikTok about cultures, right? How everyone just assumes culture is a race, but it's not. It's culture is based on, and their traditions and their spiritualities are based on the needs and the customs of that specific culture. And so when people are looking at from the outside someone's religion or someone's song or someone's dance or someone's clothes that is culturally defined, you cannot say, oh, well, that's a racial thing. No, that's a cultural thing. And you cannot separate that person's religion and that person's culture and their tradition from the person. So it has nothing to do with race. And the idea here is that we can never be one giant world order or one giant nation because we need that diversity. We need those cultural differences because the needs in different parts of the world are so different. What someone needs in Alaska is different from what someone needs in Australia because of the environment that they live in. And their customs and their gods and their foods are going to be different because of that. And so instead, what this is talking about is that in order for all of us to spiritually elevate, we should approach each other from the place of charity and from the place of, I give for you today, you give to me tomorrow. And at the end of the day, everyone will have. You know what I mean? And it's a beautiful way of looking at it because it allows all of us to truly um celebrate each other's differences, give to each other when we need, and everyone rises. Like, I don't know, I just don't know how hard it is, but it's hard for some people. It really is. Humankind progresses by means of individuals who increasingly improve and enlighten themselves. When these grow in number, they take the lead and draw the rest forward. Geniuses appear from time to time to provide an impulse, followed by individuals invested with authority, who, as instruments of God, enable humankind to advance many centuries in just a few years. The progress of cultures further highlights the justice of reincarnation. Moral individuals make praiseworthy efforts to help a nation advance morally and intellectually. The nation thus transformed will be happier both in this world and in the next. Nonetheless, during the slow march across the centuries, thousands of people die every day. What will be the fate of those who succumb along the way? Does their relative state of imperfection deprive them from the contentedness reserved for those who arrive last? Or is their happiness relative? Divine justice could not consecrate such an injustice. Through the plurality of existences, the right to happiness is the same for all. For one, for no one is deprived of progress. Those who live at a time of barbarity can return at a time of civility in the same culture or in another one. It is obvious that all are benefited by the ascendant march. The theory of one soul existence, however, presents another problem in this case. According to this theory, the soul is created at the moment of birth, and thus, in some individuals, are more advanced than others. It is because God has created a more advanced soul for them. Why this is favoritism? Why would these individuals who have not lived any longer than the ones before them, often not as long, deserve to be given a more advanced soul? But even this is not the main problem. Over 1,000 years, a culture passes from barbarity to civility. If human beings were able to live 1,000 years, one could conceive that they would have time to progress during this time. But every day, humans die at all ages, and their numbers are constantly being replenished, with new ones appearing and disappearing every day to such an extent that by the end of the millennium, no trace remains of the former inhabitants. The barbaric nations have become civilized. What is it that actually progressed? The individuals who used to be barbarians? But what they already died long ago? Is it the newly arrived? Well, if their souls were created at the time of birth, they could not have existed during the time of barbarity. Thus, we would have to believe that the efforts made to civilize a people do not have the power to improve imperfect souls, but to cause God to create other souls who are more advanced. Let us compare this theory of progress with one that has been given to us by the spirits. The souls that come during the time of civility have had their infancy like all others, but they had already lived many times before, and they arrived already advanced as the result of previous progress. They come because they are attracted to an environment which is sympathetic to them and which suits their current state. Therefore, the efforts made to civilize a people do not have the effect of determining the future creation of souls who are more advanced, but of attracting those who have already progressed, whether they had already lived among the people in times of barbarity or whether they have come somewhere else. Upon this rests the key to progress of all humankind. When all cultures are at the same level of morality, the earth will house only good spirits living in fraternal unity. Do you hear that? When all souls and all cultures are at the same level of morality, the earth will house only good spirits living in fraternal unity. So, right off the bat, that takes away this idea that all spirits are good. Because we know that spirits go through evolution the same way that people go through evolution. And so there are such things as not so great spirits and spirits that need to evolve more. Now, whether we say that they're evil and they deserve punishment and all this other stuff is a whole different conversation. But this idea that they are not either intellectually evolved or morally evolved plays a huge factor in what role that they play in this universe. Okay, let's keep it moving. The bad spirits, having been repelled and dislocated, will seek out less evolved worlds and an environment that suits them until they have made themselves worthy to come back to our transformed world. The usual theory, unlike that of reincarnation, has one further effect. Works of social improvement only benefit present and future generations, but are meaningless for past generations who were unfortunate because they arrived too soon and became what they could under the burden of the barbaric acts. According to the spirit's doctrine, however, later progress also profits those generations that are reborn into better conditions. And they can therefore perfect themselves in an environment of civility. So we're now on the subject of civilization. Hi, so those of you who are joining me, I'm reading from the Spirits book by Allan Kardec. We do this every Sunday at 7 p.m. and we're just moving through it. We're getting through it. So we're now on the subject of civilization. 790. Does civilization represent progress for humankind, or does it represent decadence, as some philosophers profess? Incomplete progress, because humankind does not pass suddenly from infancy to maturity. Well, is it reasonable to condemn civilization? Instead, condemn those who abuse it. Do not condemn the work of God. 791. Will civilization be purified one day so that the evils it has produced will disappear? Yes. When morality is developed as intelligence, the fruit cannot become before the blossom. 792. Why doesn't civilization immediately effectuate all the good it could produce? That's a great question, actually. It's like, if we're quote unquote civil, then like why don't we already just do good? Like what the fuck? Like why does it take so hard? Like why is it so hard? Because humans are not ready or disposed to obtain that good. Well, wouldn't it also be because in creating new needs, it incites new passions? He's talking about greed. Yes. And because all of a spirit's faculties do not evolve in tandem, everything takes time. You cannot expect perfect fruit from an imperfect civilization. Ooh, you heard that? 793. Well, what signs may one recognize as a completed civilization? So like what should we be looking for when to know that a civilization has finally reached its peak of moral evolution? Like how do we know that we're ready as spirits to hit that mark? You will recognize it by its moral development. You believe yourselves to be very advanced because you have made great discoveries and wonderful inventions, and because you are better situated and better clothed than the primitives. However, you will only have the right to truly call yourself civilized when you have finally banished the vices from your society that dishonor it, and when you finally live as brothers and sisters by practicing charity. Until then, you are really no more than enlightened cultures that have passed through only the first phase of civilization. Civilization goes through stages of development. Like everything else, an incomplete civilization is in a state of transition which engenders special evils unknown in the primitive state, but which nonetheless constitutes a natural and necessary progress that brings with it the remedy for those very evils. As civilization perfects itself, it puts an end to some of the evils it has engendered, and all evils will eventually disappear with moral progress. Of two cultures that have reached the summit of the social scale, the one that may be called the more advanced, in the true sense of the word, is the one where the least selfishness, cupidity, and pride are found, where the customs are more intellectual and moral than material, where intelligence can develop and with more freedom, where there is more kindness, good faith, and reciprocal benevolence and generosity, where the prejudices of caste and birth are less rooted, for such prejudices are incompatible with true love for one's neighbor, where the laws do not grant any special privileges and are the same for the last as for the first, where justice is administered with the least partiality, where the weak always find support against the strong, and where human life, beliefs, and opinions are better respected, where there are fewer unhappy individuals, and lastly, where persons of goodwill are always surely they will not lack the minimum of what is needed to live on. All right, so now we're on the subject of the progress of human legislation. So this book covers everything. I mean, this book covers everything from, morals to society to justice to the spiritual realm. I mean, like, this book just covers everything that sort of gives you the groundwork and the foundation of the spirit. And then the medium's book talks a lot more about the role of the medium and what the medium needs to work on. And we'll be doing that book after this one. We'll be doing that together, okay? So the progress of human legislation. Let's get to it. 794, question 794. Ugh, your girl, sinuses, hold on. Okay. Could society be governed solely by natural laws without having to resort to human laws? So we talked about the natural laws in the previous chapter. All right. If you guys want to catch up on all the previous chapters that we read before this one, just simply go to my YouTube channel and all the previous chapters are there. Rum and Coke, Poppy, rum and Coke. All right. Okay, so let me do the question again. Could society be governed solely by natural laws without having to resort to human laws? It could if humans understood them well enough. If they were to actually practice them, such laws would be sufficient. Society, however, has its requirements and needs special laws. 795. Well, what causes the instability of human laws? In times of barbarity, the strongest are the ones who make the laws, and they frame them to their own advantage. It becomes necessary to modify them as humans comprehend justice more clearly. Human laws become more stable as they move towards true justice. That is to say, to the degree that they are made for all, and as they are aligned with natural law. Civilization has created for people new necessities that are related to the social position such people occupy. It has been necessary to regulate the rights and duties of such positions through human laws. Under the influence of their passions, however, humans have often created imaginary rights and duties that are condemned by natural law. Nations remove these rights and duties from their codes as they progress. Natural law is immutable and is always the same for everyone. Human law is variable and progressive, and it alone could have consecrated the right of the strongest at humankind's infancy. 796. Aren't harsh criminal laws a necessity in the present state of society? A depraved society has a need for harsher laws. Unfortunately, such laws are meant to punish a wrong after it has already been committed, rather than to cut out the roots of what has caused the wrong. Only education can reform humankind, which will then have no more need for such harsh laws. Oh, I love this book. Okay, 797. How can humankind be led to reform its laws? This will occur naturally through the force of circumstances and by the influence of moral persons who will guide it along the path of progress. Many things have already been reformed and many more will be. Just wait a while. Okay, now we're on the subject of Spiritism's influence on progress. So this is talking about how this Spiritism and this whole like gospel, if you will, how it's influenced on progress, our progress. Will Spiritism become a common belief or will it be only accepted by a few? It will certainly become a common belief and will mark a new era in history of humankind, for it belongs to nature itself. In fact, the time has come in which it must take its place among the other branches of human knowledge. It will nevertheless have to withstand a great struggle, more against personal interest than against conviction, because you must not ignore the fact that there are persons interested in fighting it, some out of self centeredness, others from purely material motives. Its opponents, however, will become more and more isolated and will finally be forced to think like the others, lest they make themselves look foolish. Ideas are only transformed over time, never suddenly. They weaken from generation to generation and end up disappearing along with those who have professed them, who are replaced by other individuals imbued with new principles, as is the case with political ideas in particular. Look at paganism. There are few today who profess the religious ideas of pagan times. Nevertheless, many centuries after the advent of Christianity, they have left behind traces that only a complete renewal of humankind can erase. It will be the same with Spiritism. If it has come considerable progress, but for 2 or 3 generations, there will still be a remnant of incredulity that only time will dissipate. However, its forward progress will be more rapid than was the progress of Christianity because Christianity itself has opened the paths and has provided support for Spiritism. Christianity had to destroy, and Spiritism has only to build. Whew, 799. In what way can Spiritism contribute to our progress? By destroying materialism. Period, point blank. One of the sores of society. It enables people to comprehend where their true interests really lie. Since the future life is no longer veiled by doubt, men and women will better understand that they can ensure their future based on the present. Destroying the prejudices of sect, class, color, Spiritism teaches them about the great solidarity that must unite them as brothers and sisters. Question 800. Shouldn't we perhaps fear that Spiritism may not be able to defeat humans' indifference and their attachment to material things? To suppose that any cause could act as some kind of magic spell to transform humans would be to know very little about them. Individuals' ideas are modified little by little, and generations are needed to completely erase old habits. Transformation, therefore, can only be realized with time, gradually and step by step. With each generation, a part of the veil has been lifted, and Spiritism has now come to remove it once and for all. In the meantime, even if it had the effect of correcting one defect of only one person, it would be a step for that person, and therefore a great good, since the first step would make further ones easier. Question 801. Why haven't the spirits taught from the earliest times what they are teaching today? You do not teach children the same things that you teach to adults. Just as you do not give newborns food they cannot digest. Each thing has its own time. The spirits taught many things the humans distorted and did not understand, but which they are now capable of comprehending. Even though their teaching was incomplete, they prepared the soil to receive the seed which is now about to bear fruit. 802. Since Spiritism must mark a step in the progress of humankind, why don't the spirits speed up this progress through manifestations that are so widespread and patent that they could lead the most incredulous to believe? You desire miracles, but God has sown them by the handful right under your feet. Yet, you still have people who deny them. Did Christ himself convince his contemporaries by the wonders he performed? Even today, do you not see those who deny the most obvious facts occurring under their very eyes? Are there not those who would not believe even if they did see them? No. It is not by miracles that God guides humankind. Out of divine goodness, God wishes to leave it to the merit of being convinced through reason. All right, y'all. So we're now on the chapter of the law of equality. And in this chapter, we talk about natural equality, the inequality of aptitudes, social inequalities, the inequality of wealth, trials of wealth and poverty, equality of the rights between men and women, and equality in death. Let's get to it. Natural equality. 803. Are all people equal before God? Yes. All are heading toward the same goal. God has made the divine laws for everybody. You often say, the sun shines the same on everyone, and you thereby state a greater and more general truth than you might think. All are subject to the same laws of nature. All are born with the same fragility. All are subject to the same sufferings. The bodies of the rich decompose like the bodies of the poor. Therefore, God has not granted natural superiority to anyone, either by birth or by death. All are equal before God. We're now on the subject of the inequality of aptitudes. 804. Why hasn't God endowed everyone with the same aptitudes? God has created all spirits equal, but each one of them has lived over a longer or shorter amount of time and has consequently developed more or fewer aptitudes. The differences lies in the degree of experience and volition, their free will, by which some advance more rapidly, endowing them with a wide range of aptitudes. A medley of aptitudes is necessary so that all may contribute to the designs of Providence within the limits of the development of their physical and intellectual powers. What one cannot do, another does, and so all end up having their useful function. Furthermore, since all worlds are united in solidarity, it is necessary for the inhabitants of more highly evolved worlds, most of which were created well before yours, to come and live here in order to set an example for you. 805. In passing from a more evolved world to a lesser one, does the spirit keep all of its acquired faculties intact? Did you get that question? In passing from a more evolved world to a lesser evolved world, does the spirit keep all of its acquired faculties intact? Yes. We have already told you that the spirit who has progressed cannot regress. In its spirit state, it may choose a coarser envelope or a more precarious position and or a more precarious position than the previous one, but always to serve it as a lesson and to help its progress. So again, just like in the previous chapters, your spirit, the spirit that resides within you, whatever level of progression it has gotten to so far in all the lives that it has lived, whatever that level is, it's never going to regress. So even if you come into this world and you make a fuck ton of mistakes, your mistakes are not going to regress you. They're just going to simply keep you where you're at. And then the next time you're reborn, that's where you're going to start and you're just going to keep moving up if you learn your lessons. Does that make sense? And so those who have reached a level where they can then go to a world that has less evolved spirits in it, they do that to be more so for an example, to become an example for those spirits because they've already reached that level. Okay? Thus, the diversity of aptitudes among individuals is not related to the inmost nature of their creation, but to the degree of perfection they have reached as spirits. God has not, therefore, created an inequality of faculties, but has permitted the different degrees of inequalities of faculties, the different degrees of development to remain in contact with one another so that the more advanced may help the more backward to progress. And also so that in meeting one another, all persons may understand the law of charity and that must unite them. Does that make sense? So we're now on the subject of social inequalities. Social inequalities. 806. Is the inequality of social conditions a law of nature? No. It is the work of humankind, not of God. Will this inequality disappear someday? Only God's eternal laws. No, sorry. Only God's laws are eternal. There we go. Do you not see inequalities disappearing little by little every day? They are destined to disappear together with the predominance of pride and selfishness, leaving only the different levels of merit. A day will come when the members of the great family of God's children will no longer regard themselves as being of pure or less pure blood, because only the spirit is pure or less pure. and such does not depend on a social position. 807. Well, what about those who abuse the superiority of their social position by oppressing the weak for their own gain? Like what's happening today. They are to be lamented, those wretched beings. They will be oppressed in their turn, and they will be reborn into an existence in which they will suffer everything they have caused others to suffer. We're now on the subject of the inequality of wealth. These subjects are going fast, so I'm happy about that. 808. Doesn't the inequality of wealth originate in the inequality of faculties, which give to some persons more means of acquiring things than to other persons? Yes and no. What would you say about fraud and robbery? But inherited wealth is not the fruit of a bad passion. How do you know it's not? Go back to its origin to find out if it's pure. Woo! So just because you inherit it doesn't mean that you are, what's the right word? Relieved of how that money was obtained, right? And this is the same concept that we talk about when it comes to white privilege, right? So when we talk about people who benefit from the systematic racism and the systematic oppression of others, that doesn't necessarily mean benefit financially, but it talks about how you can walk down the street without fearing the life of yourself because of the color of your skin, and that right there has a foundation, was inherited through your ancestors who got it from being racist, right? So like that's the whole point, is that you can't absolve yourself of where it originated from just because you yourself aren't actively participating in it now. All right. And that's what he's talking about here. So, yes and no when it comes to money and faculties being related, right? Do you know whether or not, if at its source it was the fruit of spoliation or injustice? But apart from the issue of its possible wrongful origin, do you believe that the longing for wealth, even when honestly acquired, and the secret longing conceived to possess it as soon as possible, or laudable sentiments? That is what God judges. And I can assure you that the divine judgment is stricter than that of humans. 809. If a fortune has been wrongly acquired to start with, are the heirs later responsible for this? Here we go. Of course. They are not responsible for the wrong that others committed, especially if they are ignorant of it. But you should know that a fortune is often destined for certain individuals in order to provide them the opportunity to repair an injustice. Happy for them if they comprehend this. If they repair the injustice in the name of the one who committed it in the first place, the reparation will be taken into account for everyone concerned. But because it is almost always the original wrongdoer who, from the spirit world, inspires them to do it. 810. We may dispose of our assets more equitably or less equitably without breaking the law. Thus, are we responsible for our testamentary dispositions after death? Every action bears its own fruit. The fruit of good deeds is sweet, whereas the fruit of other deeds is always bitter. Always bear this in mind. 811. Is absolute equality of wealth possible, and has it ever existed? No, it is not possible. The diversity of faculties and the characters oppose it. Damn. So there will always be people who have and people who have not. Simply because that's the way we have wanted to keep it. Nevertheless, there are those who believe it to be remedy for all social ills. What do you think of that? Either they are farmers of theories or they are ambitious and envious. They do not understand that equality would be quickly broken by the very force of things. Fight selfishness, for that is your social plague. Do not chase chimras. I'm not really sure how to say that. If you know what that means, let me know. 812. If equality of wealth is not possible, does the same apply to well-being? No. But well-being is relative and everyone could enjoy if everyone could enjoy it if humans understood each other better. For true well-being consists in employing one time according to one's liking and not in working at something one does not enjoy. Since everyone has different aptitudes, no useful work would therefore be left undone. Equilibrium exists in everything. Humans are the ones who upset it. Is it possible for everyone to understand one another? Humans will understand one another when they practice the law of justice. 813. There are persons who fall into deprivation and poverty through their own fault. May society be held responsible for this? Yes. We have already told you that society is often the primary cause of such wrongs. It is not society's responsibility to attend to the moral education of its members. It is the frequently bad education that distorts these persons' judgment instead of stifling their harmful tendencies. And now we're on the subject of the trials of wealth and poverty. Nice. The trials of wealth and poverty. 814. Why has God bestowed wealth and power on some and poverty on others? That's a loaded question, right? In order to test everyone differently. Moreover, as you know, such trials are chosen by the spirits themselves, and they often fail at them. See, and this is where, once again, this is where I say when you're reading these books, any book that has like a religious connotation to it, take everything with a grain of salt. Everything. Because this is one of those things where you can easily see how this can slip and slide into like a victim blaming mentality, right? You can see that the way he answered that question. But let's keep it moving. Moreover, as you know, such trials are chosen by spirits themselves and they often fail at them. 815. Which of the two trials is more dangerous to humans? Poverty or wealth? They are equally dangerous. Poverty provokes complaining against providence, whereas wealth incites all kinds of excess. 816. If the wealthy endure more temptations, don't they also have the means at their disposal for doing more good? That is precisely what they do not always do. They become selfish, proud, insatiable. Their wants increase and with their fortunes, and they never think that they have enough. An elevated position in the world and authority over our fellow beings are trials as great and risky as misfortune. For the wealthier and more powerful we are, the more obligations we must fulfill, and the greater are the means at our disposal to do good and evil. God tests the poor through resignation and the wealthy through the use they make of their wealth and their power. Wealth and power beget all the passions that attach us to matter, and they keep us from spiritual perfection. That is why Jesus said, "Verily I say to you, that it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven." Ooh, drops mic. We are now on the subject of equality of rights between men and women. 817. Are men and women equal before God, and do they have the same rights? Mm. Has not God given them both the knowledge of good and evil and the faculties for progress? That's literally the answer. That's the answer. That spirit was like, really? Question 818. Where does the moral inferiority of women in certain regions come from? Okay, y'all, listen, I just have to tell you that this conversation is gonna trigger me, okay? Because I'm very much a feminist, so it's gonna trigger me. So I just want to let you know, just right off the bat, that I gotta keep it together, okay? So just bear with me, all right? From the unjust and cruel dominion that men have exerted over them. It is a result of social institutions and the abuse of strength over weakness. Among men who have not advanced very much from the moral point of view, might makes right. 819. For what purpose are women physically weaker than men? To assign special functions to them. Men are meant for rough work by being stronger, women for lighter work, but both mutually help each other in the trials of a life full of bitterness. 820. Doesn't women's physical weakness make them naturally dependent on men? God has given strength to some in order to protect the weak, not to enslave them. God has fitted the organization of each sex for the functions that it must perform. If God has given less physical strength to women, God has at the same time given them greater sensitivity in relation to the delicacy of the material functions and the fragility of the beings entrusted into their care. 821. Are the functions for which women are intended by nature as important as those conferred upon men? Yes. And even greater, women give men the first notions of life. 822. Since all people are equals before God's law, shouldn't they also be equals before human law? Well, this is the first principle of justice. Do not do unto others what you would not have them do unto you. Accordingly, in order for legislation to be perfectly just, shouldn't it consecrate the equality of rights between men and women? Equality of rights, yes. Of functions, no. All persons must have their place. Let men take care of external aspects and women take care of internal aspects, each according to their own aptitude, in order to be just. Human law must consecrate the equality of rights between men and women. Any special privilege granted to one and not the other is contrary to justice. The emancipation of women accompanies the progress of civilization. Their servitude is in step with barbarity. Besides, gender exists only in the physical organization, and since spirits can become either, there are no differences between them in this respect, and consequently, they should enjoy the same rights. So now that I've breathed, let me break that down a little bit. So, he's really distinguishing between the two different laws, the human laws and God's laws. And under God's law, you know, God only sees spirit. God doesn't see gender. God does not see race. God does not see the physical in that sense. And so to God's law, men and women are equal. Like there's nothing to argue about. It's spirits. Like they're equal. But the functionality of each spirit that's placed on the earth or placed wherever is going to be different for specific reasons, for their purpose on earth. And so that's where the human laws come in. So the human laws are all fucked up, obviously, because the men rule everything. So the men are going to be considered better and have more function and have more whatever. So in his statement here, all those questions, the way that he was phrasing the questions, it was definitely coming from that perspective. But at the end of the day, those functions are less about gender and more about, well, this is why it has to be this way and this is why this person has to be this way because the job still needs to get done. Even if they were to switch, the job still needs to get done. And at the end of the day, in God's eyes, the spirit itself is all good. Does that make sense? So, yes, I know it's an annoying conversation to have, but it must be had. So now we're on the last subject of the equality in death. Let's talk about that. 823. Where does the desire to perpetuate one's memory on funeral monuments come from? What? That's a weird question. It's just such a weird. Where does the desire to perpetuate one's memory on funeral monuments come from? Oh, okay, get it. The last act of pride. This spirit is so saucy. He's like, because people are just like narcissistic and that's the last thing they want to do, right? The last act of pride. That's great. But isn't the pompousness of funeral monuments most frequently determined by relatives who desire to honor the memory of the deceased rather than the deceased him or herself? It is the pride of the relatives who want honor for themselves. It is not always for the deceased that all these demonstrations are made, but for the vanity, for consideration by the world, and for the parading of their wealth. Do you believe the memory of the loved ones is less lasting in the hearts of the poor just because they can only place one flower on their loved one's grave? Do you believe the marble can save from forgetfulness those who had been useless while on earth? Oof, this spirit is giving it to him. Oh my goodness. 824. Is funeral pomp completely reproachable? Nah. When it honors the memory of a moral person, it is just and sets a good example. Like, you can almost hear the tone of the spirit. It's like, I mean, we don't really need it. Funerals are just like a waste of money and it's like just all for show. And cemeteries are a waste of land and all that. Like, you could just tell, like, the spirit's just like, whatever, I guess. The grave is a place of meeting for all humankind. All human distinctions are mercilessly ended there. The wealthy try in vain to perpetuate their memory by means of ostentatious monuments, and time will destroy these monuments just as it destroys their bodies. And nature so has so willed it. The memory of their good and bad deeds will be less perishable than their grave, and the pomp of their funerals will neither cleanse away their baseness nor raise them one single degree in the spirit hierarchy. Shit. That is just so like, ow. All right, guys. So that's where I'm going to stop because we just got to the next chapter and it's already 8 o'clock. I like to read for only 1 hour. So the next chapter, when we meet up again, is going to be called The Law of Freedom. And that chapter, we're going to be talking about natural freedom, slavery, freedom of thought, freedom of consciousness, free will, fatalism, knowledge of the future, a theoretical summary of the driving force behind human actions. Woo, that's going to be a load. So let's look at you guys to see if there's any questions. Now that we're all done, now is the time to ask your questions or to pose your thoughts about everything. Let's see. Oh, sorry, Choco. I just finished the readings at 7 o'clock. Let's see. Feeling inspired. Awesome. Let's see. How are you too? I'm good. Thank you guys. Oh, that's awesome. Yes, I am, Elba. I'm live on Facebook too, girl. Awesome. So no questions. All right. So then I want to say thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. And we'll meet again next Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to continue reading our book. And please like, share, subscribe, comment, just show your support as best as you can because honestly, one of my favorite things to do is just teach. I just love to teach, and that's what I'm here for. That's what I love to do and make connections with people. So please subscribe, please share, please let people know about what's going on. And I will see you guys next Sunday. Have a beautiful spring equinox. Many blessings to you all. Goodbye, goodbye, bye.